Hi everyone, welcome to part 2. Okay, Taimanov has just played King d8, which is, as I just said, threatening to take the bishop in the event of King takes b6. And here Fischer played a very nice move. Again, if you want to try and spot it, then stop the video now. Bishop takes g6 is what he played, and this is the next step in the winning strategy. White crashes through by sacking his piece, which is a common feature of such endgames. After knight takes g6, king takes b6, king d7, and king takes c5, white has 3 pawns for the bishop and a winning position. After knight e7 and b4, black is completely helpless against the advance of the white pawns. Play continued. A takes b4, c takes b4, knight c8, a5, knight d6, b5, knight e4 check, aiming to pick up white's g-pawn, but this changes very little. White will queen long before black does. So king b6, king c8, king c6, taking the opposition, and Fritz now gives an advantage of over 7 pawns to white, so it's completely winning. After king b8 and b6, Taimanov saw that there was no hope and resigned. So it was a fine display of endgame skill from one of the best endgame players of all time, Bobby Fischer. So those were examples where the bishop was better than the knight. Now let's have a look at a couple where the knight is superior. By their nature, bishops are best in open positions. In closed positions, on the other hand, a bishop often fails to excel, even in positions where it can be considered a good bishop. Here is an instructive example from one of the best living players today, Boris Gelfand. He reached this position against Russian GM Vladimir Malakov at the USSR Championships in 2005. Bishop takes b8 was Gelfand's first move in this position, initiating the correct exchange, despite the fact that black's remaining piece, his bishop on h8, can be considered a good piece, as his central pawns are fixed on light squares. The point is that overall the position is closed, and so white's knight will be the superior piece. After king takes b8 came h4, king c7, and h5, which is a very nice idea from Gelfand. The point here is that g takes h5 is forced, and it opens a route for the white king to penetrate the black position. If black plays something else, for example king d6, now white can win a pawn, with h takes g6, h takes g6, and knight h4. So g takes h5, now king g3, bishop g7, king h4, king d6. There's no way for the black king to penetrate here on the queen's side, so white has nothing to worry about there. These pawns are covering the entrance holes. If b5 ever, if b takes a5, b takes, a4, b takes a4, and it's the same, the king can't penetrate, so it's alright. So king takes h5, and now bishop f8, knight e5, bishop g7, knight d3, king e7, knight e5. And bishop takes e5 now would help white, because he'd be able to snatch up black's h-pawn and then win easily. For example, bishop takes e5, d takes e5, king f8, king h6, king g8, f4, king h8, g6, and white will win thanks to his pawn activity. If h takes g6, h takes g6, the king comes over here, mops up these pawns and queens. So bishop takes e5 isn't an option after knight e5, and king d6 is what Malakov played. Now came f4, king e7, and g6, which is a very nice move because it makes more room for the white king. After h takes g6, king takes g6, and bishop h8. Again, exchanging on e5 will result in a win for white. For example, bishop takes e5, f takes e5, king e8, king f6, attacking the e-pawn, so king d7 to defend, but now king f7, and the e-pawn will fall on the next move, after which black's position collapses. So bishop f8, h8, now knight f7 attacking the bishop, bishop f6, and knight g5, another very nice move, which forces bishop h8. Playing instead bishop takes g5 is of course completely losing after f takes g5, and the king will be able to shepherd this pawn home. So bishop h8, and now knight h7, which is a great move from Gelfand, who now has a winning position. The point is that the bishop now has no squares to move to, and with the pawns locked, he must now move his king, and before long white will be able to force Zugzwang. Play continued, king e8, knight f6 check, king f8. Playing instead bishop takes f6, loses to king takes f6 as we saw before, king d7, king f7, and white wins. So king f8, now knight h5. Also winning was knight d7 check, king e8, and knight takes b6, but Gelfand's choice was more professional, because after knight h5, king g8 came king h6, putting black in Zugzwang. He can only move his king now, and the only reasonable move is king f7, but now comes king h7, forcing bishop f6, and now knight takes f6, king takes f6, and king g8, and white will be able to win because he has the opposition of the kings. For example, king e7, king g7, and soon e6 is going to fall, along with, as before, black's entire position. So Malakov was forced to resign, and it was a brilliant endgame from Gelfand. Okay, on to our final example for this segment. It's very important to remember that every rule has exceptions. In this position, the knight is able to dominate the bishop even on an open board with an asymmetrical pawn structure. It was reached by Luke McShane in a game against Shakhriyar Mamedyarov at the Lausanne tournament in 2004. Mamedyarov with black has just offered a draw, which is reasonable enough given the position. However, McShane refused the offer and set a nice trap now with knight e4, which is tempting black to play king takes b5, which is losing after king d4. So a very strong move, and much better than taking on d6 with the knight immediately, as now the king and knight completely dominate the board. This is the trap that knight e4 created, because it's lured the black king away from the center and allowed the white king to move in there and take control. So king b6, knight takes d6, king d7, knight e8 check, king d8, knight f6, and now white is completely winning. After bishop c2, h5, king e7, king e5, king f7, king d6, and we're seeing another endgame principle at work here, that of the problem of having two weaknesses to defend at once, overloading the black pieces. In this instance, white having two passed pawns is too much for black to deal with. So bishop a4, now king f5, king g7, king g5, king f7, d7, king e7, and now a very nice continuation from McShane. If you want to try and spot it, then stop the video now. King f4 is the move, which is leaving the knight to be taken, although that would of course be a blunder because the d pawn with a queen. But the main point is that after bishop c2, preparing to stop the advance of the h pawn, white now has knight e4, and there's no way for the bishop to catch the h pawn, and the black king alone cannot stop both of the pawns. Even with bishop b3, hoping to reroute and stop the pawn that way, h6, bishop g8, now knight f6, attacking the bishop, and it can't stop the h pawn if king takes, and the d pawn is queening. So here, presumably very annoyed, Mamedyarov threw in the towel, as he's now losing at least a piece, and then the game very quickly afterwards. So it was a great endgame from McShane, and a fine example of how the most important thing in chess is not to stick blindly to rules and dogma, but to play the position in front of you at the board. Even with an open position and an asymmetrical pawn structure, the knight can be better. It's just a matter of using your judgment overall in the position and making the correct decisions in the middle game as to which piece you want to have in the end game, considering everything we've just looked over. So I hope you enjoyed this installment. Please leave any comments or thoughts. Thanks very much.